Alright, so this week we're going to be talking about how we develop one of these storylines using the Save the Cat ditto that I provided for you. So, one of the things we talked about in class was that you already had this really good idea, and you were going to use this idea to create an entertaining story. This is going to be a feature-length film that you're designing, so you want to make sure that you address a lot of major issues. You know, this is a bigger sort of thing you're going to have to put together, probably than you're going to do for the rest of your school career. So, something that's a little bit new that I didn't mention in class is the idea of a summary sentence. You can kind of think of this as being your elevator pitch or some of the other sorts of things that you would use to quickly tell someone about what your story's about. It's not necessarily something entertaining, it's more a good storyline. The example I use in the notes that I provided for you was one from Frozen, and you can read that over. And it's a little bit of a run-on sentence, but I still think it gets the job done. Let's talk about the Save the Cat handout that I provided for you. So right at the top of page 1, you can see that there's the opening image, the theme is stated, the setup, the catalyst, the debate, breaking into two, a B story, fun and games, midpoint, bad guys close in, all is lost, dark night of the soul, break into 3, finale, and final image. Now, the explanations are very helpful in this. For instance, the opening image is a scene in the movie that sets up the tone, type, and initial salvo of a film. So the before snapshot, then we get into the theme being stated. This is often spoken to the main character. Think about Lion King, where Mufasa is kind of explaining the whole circle of life thing, or so on and so forth. Then you get into the setup, and that grabs the audience's interest. You get into the catalyst, that's the life-changing news. It might be something like, you have to grow up and become king, I don't want to be king. And you move on to debates, and so on and so forth throughout it. Now, one of the things that looks sort of difficult to me is this notion of the finale. And the finale is where the movie's going to really work or not work. And it includes gathering the team, executing the plan, the high tower surprise, digging deep down, and, getting this whole thing to come together properly. These are all things that are pretty important for you to cover while you're putting your film together. We didn't talk too much about character other than the importance of you having a strong character. And this is where you're mostly going to have a strength. I know that when I was a student, creating a character is probably where I felt I had the most capacity to make something interesting. So you want to come up with an adjective to describe your hero. That can be wimpy, or that can be brave, that can be anything. It can be smug, arrogant, or rich, or poor. But one overwhelming adjective that covers who they are. And you may also want to come up with an additional description beyond that. But as far as like a physical description goes right now, it's not the most important thing to include. Your character is going to have to go through change. And on page 3 of this Save the Cat handout, you've got your character arcs. And I've used a lot of these character arcs when I've worked on storyboards. Character arcs can happen within, say, just a sequence. It can happen within a 3-minute piece. But over the course of a longer film, we definitely want to see a longer, cohesive character arc, so that we're not confused, so that the audience is able to kind of feel what's happening with this character. And on page 4 of the handout, it gets into how a primary character who forms the spine of the entire movie is going to have the biggest character arc. They learn the most important lesson. They also want to change the least. And while a lot of these things may seem contradictory, or may seem like they complicate the film, these are things that are going to be shown through acting for the most part. These are things that are going to affect how the character makes their decisions. So it's always gratifying to have a character who makes sort of foolish decisions at the beginning. Other things that are really important in this story is that you want to include things such as what the story is about. There's going to be 1 to maybe 2 characters if there's a love story or a buddy movie, where if there's a group of buddies, 2 of the buddies will be closer together. You can think about Lord of the Rings as a really good example with the two hobbits who are responsible for destroying the ring. It's much more interesting when there's the two of them, and especially when they introduce Gollum later on as a kind of antagonistic but also helpful character in it, where one character starts to break down, the other one's trying to keep him from falling apart. So there's a lot of drama and a lot of interest that's generated with this notion of maybe having two major characters. It's going to make your film a lot more complicated to do, but it'll also make it a lot more enjoyable. The other thing that this handout talks about that I really like is the notion that when things go dead in a movie, the movie goes dead and people lose interest. And plenty of movies have moments like this, so be very cautious of it. Transformative things in a film are really good. So whether it's like Brother Bear, where you have a literal transformation, or if you just have a mental transformation, a spiritual transformation, a character who goes from being cowardly to brave, these are all really good. These are hard to do, and that's why people appreciate seeing them in a storyline. So they're difficult, you're going to have to figure it out, but definitely you want to include that. And I include at the end of this something that's not from Save the Cat, which is from the hero's journey. And he breaks things down into quarters, which isn't how you normally break apart a film. You usually say it in acts. We're going to want to read over these. These are really helpful if you're going to do an adventure action story. They're not as helpful if you're doing kind of more of a comedy, but I would still encourage you to read these over because he's a well-known person who's an expert in these. So I will continue this with another shorter video regarding the second handout, which is the Save the Cat green light. Okay, bye.